You had a good trip though, right?
I had a great trip, yeah. It's like a second home to me because it's so like familiar to me.
So I know you were watching some stuff when you were coming and going on the various flights back and forth to Taiwan. So when we come back, we'll talk about those movies, and then we'll move on to some other stuff after that. Hello, welcome to the show. This is the Extra Buttery Podcast, episode 50, the 10th episode of 2019. Thanks for coming on back and joining in again for another episode. Today on the show, we're going to be touching on a couple of the movies that Jason was able to catch up on during his recent trip to Taiwan. All that time in the air, you got to spend it doing something. So he's got a couple of little mini reviews on a couple of those things. And then we'll briefly touch on a bit of movie news, some casting information about the new Christopher Nolan film and the new Batman film from Matt Reeves. But then we'll move into some discussion of John Wick Chapter 3, the latest in the John Wick franchise. And we'll do a final wrap-up discussion on Game of Thrones. I think a lot of us are kind of looking around, wondering what happened there, so there'll be lots to get into with that. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host Jason Chen. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Tired?
A little bit. I'm glad I'm back home, though, after 2 weeks in 30-degree weather, 80% humidity. Have fun. But it was a great trip. I always enjoy it when I go back, and it's always kind of bittersweet when I leave.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back. It was nice to take a little break.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be back and talking to you.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Both going and coming, you were catching up on a couple of movies that you'd been planning to see for some time.
Yeah. So with a total of 22 hours of flight time between the two flights, there's a lot of sleeping involved, obviously, but the other good part is that you get to watch quite a few films on the plane. They have a mix of like old and new films, so I watched 3 that sort of just popped up early on when I was scrolling through and just settled on films that I had been meaning to see, but for whatever reason missed. I watched Crazy Heart, A Simple Favor, and American Pastoral. Okay, so the first one I saw was Crazy Heart. I've been meaning to watch that one. That's the one with Jeff Bridges and Maggie Gyllenhaal. Have you ever seen that?
No, but I've been meaning to because it's Jeff Bridges won the Oscar for that, and it's directed by a guy who
Scott Cooper.
Yeah, that's right. So he did Crazy Heart, and Jeff Bridges won an Oscar for it. Then he went and made this movie called Out of the Furnace with Christian Bale. Mm-hmm. Then after that, he teamed up with Johnny Depp for Black Mass, which wasn't very good. And I think I saw his fourth movie recently, but I forget what it was. I think it was a TIFF or something. But anyway, yeah, so Crazy Heart was good, though?
It was okay. It's one of those biopics that is fully dependent on the lead's performance.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think the story was actually that great. I think A Star is Born is actually a better film if you're looking for like a romantic drama or a romantic drama with like music as a big theme. Mm-hmm. Maybe because I saw Bridges, like a lot of Bridges' work after Crazy Heart, and a lot of them were quite well done. But looking back now, I think maybe George Clooney or Jeremy Renner should have won. Jeremy Renner, of course, was in The Hurt Locker, which was like the big one that year. Yeah, so if you want to see like a 2-hour movie about like an old white dude who's brooding and drinking and playing guitar all the time, Crazy Heart's right up your alley.
All right.
I'm surprised Maggie Gyllenhaal got nominated. She was good, but I didn't think that role was particularly big.
Oh, okay.
It's worth watching if you're into it. I just think that for 2 hours of your time, maybe you might want to catch up on something else first. The other movie I watched was A Simple Favor with Anna Kendrick and Blake
Oh,
Lively.
Yeah, I heard that was kind of like pulpy and
yes,
fun.
It is very pulpy, very fun, very much an Anna Kendrick vehicle in that it features her playing this like awkward housewife who gets into like a mess of a situation, and she uses her humor, quick wit, scrappiness to solve the riddle. It was an enjoyable film. It was kind of far-fetched, but enjoyable to say the least. Pretty funny in the parts I needed to. It was, I think, if you went in looking for like paint by color thriller, you're not going to get it because the plot twists are kind of like, whoa, what the hell's going on? I think it's an enjoyable film. I think I enjoyed this way more than Crazy Heart.
All right.
And then the third, which is, I think, a movie I had been looking forward to for a long time, and I absolutely thought was, to be honest, not good at all, was American Pastoral.
Oh, yeah, that was Ewan McGregor's directorial debut. It's based on what's the Philip Roth novel?
I think so, yeah. So it's a story about this like all-American couple. Dad was a, high school hero. Mom was a beauty queen. In New Jersey, and they have a daughter, Mary, who's played by Dakota Fanning, and she grows up to be this sort of swept up in this anti-Vietnam fervor, and she starts down this path where she becomes sort of a violent political activist, and it follows sort of Ewan McGregor's journey in raising her, losing her, and then trying to get her back again. And from what I understand, there's a lot more issues and layers to the plot in the novel. But the film itself it was really... First of all, I think Ewan McGregor is totally wrong for the title role. His range of emotion isn't as dramatic as the film needed it to be because his daughter and the things that he goes through are pretty traumatic. There are a host of issues about pacing, structure, and a lot of the characters I felt were underdeveloped. And so I thought for a political drama, which clocked in, I think, at less than 2 hours, could have been a lot slower and methodical in its pacing and storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I totally was disappointed by it because I was expecting it to be quite emotional and heavy, but it didn't really hit because... From what I remember, the buzz around this, there's quite a bit of buzz around this film. Like it was sort of like a festival film. It didn't really get a big release. So for that reason, I didn't think it was very good at all. I mean, it was like maybe a 2 out of 5 type movie.
Oh, that's disappointing.
It wasn't particularly well shot. I really appreciate films in this particular period of Americana because it's very interesting.
But did you get the sense at all that like Ewan McGregor might have a future as a director, like for other movies, maybe not necessarily like Roth adaptations, but
I didn't see really anything that would get me excited about a Ewan McGregor directed film. So no, I if it was him being a director, it wouldn't sway me either way. I thought it was a very
okay.
I thought it was a very mediocre first effort.
Yeah, that's too bad.
But moving on to like more recent news, I think you'll be excited for this one too. Chris Nolan's new film has a title.
Yeah, it's called Tenet. Not tenant as in like someone who rents an apartment, but...
or is it French for like tenay?
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. So, like,
I don't even know if that's a real French word.
Well, it does look like it might have come from French. But anyway, it like... Usually the word tenet refers to like a commonly held belief or something like that. It's a kind of an archaic word, it kind of pops up more in like, legal or like religious discourse. But
leave it to Chris Nolan to leave everything to like the technical, like lean towards the technical side of things.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if this somehow had some sort of special meaning. And this is like, again, his theme of having one word titles for films.
Oh, true. Yeah. So he, coming off of Interstellar and Dunkirk, but then even before like the Batman movies, he had The Prestige. Well, technically it's two words. Memento, yeah.
Inception. So,
but anyway, the little bit of information that we have about this is it's going to be an international spy thriller of some description with a classically Nolan-esque large cast of lots of his recurring players, including Robert Pattinson. And who else did they add in that? They did a press release recently where they kind of...
So John David Washington was the lead.
Yes.
That was announced a while ago. But Robert Pattinson and Aaron Taylor-Johnson joined the cast. It's going to be scored by Ludwig Göransson, who just won for Black Panther, I believe.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's because Hans Zimmer's busy doing Dune with Denis Villeneuve. So this will be Nolan and Hoyt van Hoytema, the cinematographer he works with all the time. This will be sort of like a big spy global caper / heist film. Details obviously under wraps. Warner Brothers obviously is gonna green light whatever Chris Nolan wants. So I can't imagine this budget being anything below 100 million. Based on the cast and the scope, it sounds like it's gonna be huge. Nolan's always got this like high mind, high brain sort of thriller or philosophy to his film, so I wouldn't be surprised if we go through that again. But at least we got the title, and I'm not exactly sure what he's referring. Do you have any guesses of what that?
No idea. Yeah, like I said, I mean, the word is kind of, it's a bit of an archaic word. It could refer to like any number of things, like legal stuff, religious stuff. But I mean, it's cool to see though that, Robert Pattinson is kind of making his way back into the mainstream. Because
yes, he just booked another big role.
Yeah, and we were going to talk about that too. So he's been, I don't know that like Warner Brothers has come right out and 100% confirmed this, but he's apparently circling or is like the top contender for Batman in the new Matt Reeves Batman that's supposed to be the newest interpretation of the character following the Batfleck movies. And
I think this is an awesome casting choice, actually.
Yeah, so like, for years, I would say like most mainstream moviegoers, when they think of Robert Pattinson, they think of Twilight. But what he's been busy doing in those years since the Twilight movies finished up has been to seek out some of the best indie filmmakers and even not so indie, like some of the more like respected auteurs, like David Cronenberg and the Safdie brothers, and been like basically trying to hone his craft with as many different voices as he can. And he's been doing some excellent work. Like I really liked him in the Safdie brothers' Good Time a couple of years ago. He was just in we talked about it here on the show actually, High Life from Claire Denis. And he's going to be in this new one that was making a lot of waves at Cannes this past week, The Lighthouse from Robert Eggers, who made The Witch back in 2015.
I think this sets the stage for a real brooding Batman.
Yep.
Probably the darkest Bruce Wayne we've ever seen. I'm not exactly sure how he's going to pull off Batman, but it's largely the suit itself anyway. I'm interested to see if he really bulks up for it.
Yeah.
I think he has a different kind of stage presence than either Christian Bale or Val Kilmer or any of the Batman before him, because he's kind of like not really the heart of the party, but the guy who kind of lurks in the corner a little bit. Maybe that's just like me remembering him from his Twilight days where he's just a lot more emo, but there's also the announcement, or I'm not sure actually if it's official or not, but it's believed that the two villains for that film are going to be Catwoman and Penguin.
Yeah, I saw one headline about that, yeah.
Yeah, so which is the same roster that Batman faced in Batman Returns.
Right.
And it's always fun to have a bird and a cat, and a bat. It's kind of like the animal thing going on. But I'm legit excited for this. Matt Reeves, I thought, knocked it out of the park with the Planet of the Apes trilogy. Mm-hmm. I think he has a real sense of a drama and tension between characters. Who's the villain in that Planet of the Apes? The second one.
Yeah, well, that was Gary Oldman.
Yeah, no, not the Bat Ape.
Bat Ape. That was Koba. Yeah, Toby
Kebbell.
Toby Kebbell. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So with the way they did Koba was, I think, really gives me confidence that he'll treat the villains right, because if anything, Batman is always a sort of like a reflection of his villains, and they always play off each other very well. So I'm interested to see him explore that dynamic. And needless to say, I'm very happy that Ben Affleck is no longer near the franchise.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sort of two minds about that, because in a series of bad movies, Ben Affleck's version of Batman was one of the better parts, which isn't saying very much because those movies are kind of bad. It would have been cool if he had the chance to kind of expand the character beyond in his own solo movie, which was the original plan. He was going to be in this Matt Reeves one before it seemed like he lost his taste for it. So maybe we'll never know what that'll really look like. But they're also being a little bit cagey about what this Matt Reeves one will actually, where it'll fit in the universe, because they haven't said whether Robert Pattinson's Batman is going to be the one who appears alongside Henry Cavill and Jason Momoa in future Justice League movies.
If they want to do it right, this has to be a one-shot. It cannot be tied to the DCEU.
Right.
I think anytime you tie a character like Batman to another franchise, I think it really restricts yourself in how you can explore that character. But are we sure Henry Cavill's coming back as Superman? Like, isn't that DCEU just like over and done with? They're just going to move ahead.
I don't think it's over, because I mean Aquaman made a crap ton of money. It passed $1 billion, and they're going to keep that going, certainly. But
are they going to bring back Superman and Batman? I know they're going to go ahead with Aquaman and the Flash and Wonder Woman, but are Batman and Superman going to come back in the same universe, in the same format?
Henry Cavill hasn't. It's kind of like this weird period where they haven't announced any official movies or release dates, so really anything could happen. Like, I imagine if they gave Henry Cavill enough money, he would come back and do it.
Which is, I guess, what they didn't do for Shazam.
True, yeah. And who knows, like, Henry Cavill is busy shooting a Netflix show based on the Witcher books / video games.
Right.
So maybe he's...
The Witcher was a book? I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a whole thing there. It's a Czech author, I believe, who he signed over the rights to the novels to adapt into a video game to this company called CD Projekt Red, and they apparently tried to acknowledge to him. They said, "Hey, we want to offer you a chunk of the royalties because we think this game is going to be really, really great, and it's going to sell a lot of copies, and you might want to have a bigger chunk of the royalties." And he said, "No, just give me like a chunk of money." And he didn't believe in the value of the project. Turns out that CD Projekt Red was totally right about it, and they ended up making way more money than the original author of the novels ever expected. And then he tried to come back around afterwards to claim that he had been defrauded or that they had done some sort of stuff. And classic industry drama kind of story. But so there's that whole thing in the background of the Witcher series, but now Henry Cavill's gonna be playing the main character in this Netflix original.
Oh, okay, interesting. I didn't know that. And Ben Affleck, like, he's done forever though.
They actually said that though. Like, I don't think it feels like everyone's talking and assuming that it's the case, but I don't know that Ben Affleck has actually said I'm done.
I don't think he'll ever outright say that, but I think it's expected that he'll just never come back as Batman. I can't see him come back in any sort of capacity. I don't think he enjoyed playing that character. I don't think he was particularly right for that role. And I think people are just tired of him as Batman too. It's kind of like George Clooney. Like, you can tell when certain actors are enjoying this role or not.
True, yeah.
And I think he falls firmly in the Clooney camp and not the Keaton / Christian Bale camp.
Right. Yeah. No, that, it's not like he's come out and said, "Hey, I desperately really want to play this character." So,
yeah, usually, like, if there's like a silence, radio silence, it usually means, no.
Yeah. And he's kind of waiting for his non-disclosure agreement to expire before he can start slagging the producers and the press.
Yeah, something like that.
We'll definitely see what comes of DC's many, like, multi-pronged approach to their stable of superheroes. It's definitely messier and more experimental than what Marvel is doing, but that's arguably just as interesting as where the kind of the fresh start essentially that Marvel's got on its plate. But also talking about like vaguely superpowered characters, we've got the new movie from Keanu Reeves, the third in the John Wick franchise.
You have no idea what's coming.
Mr. Wick broke the rules. I trust you understand the repercussions if he survives.
John Wick, excommunicado, is now in effect.
You shouldn't be here. Nice suit.
Good to see you too.
And this movie came out about a week ago from the time that we're recording this episode. Have you seen both of the previous ones or either of them?
I've seen the first one. I haven't seen the second one.
Okay.
I'm a little terrified by the second one, but I've always heard good things and I really want to watch it now. But from what I understand, this franchise could go on for longer than 3 films.
Yeah, they've already confirmed that the character's going to be back in John Wick Chapter 4, which is going to come out in 2 years' time. So
well, there you go.
Yeah, because they've been making more and more money with every successive installment. The first one was made on like a shoestring budget compared to most action movies, and it ended up making like 5 or 6 times its budget. And the second one even more so. And now the third one actually was the movie to disrupt Avengers Endgame at the box office and take the #1 slot.
And what did you think?
I liked it. I mean, the great thing about the John Wick franchise is that it's always consistent. I would say that this third one is probably just as good as the second one. It basically picks up right where the second one left off. John Wick is still on the run from a team of assassins, or what feels like more like a city of assassins, because the John Wick universe, for those who don't know, it's kind of like a hyper-exaggerated version of our own. Like, we're dealing with a version of New York or a version of the world that looks and feels a lot like ours, but it seems like almost everybody is totally blasé about the existence of hitmen and hit women. Murders and assassinations happen constantly in this universe in super public areas. Like, people are getting stabbed in this third movie right in the main lobby of the Grand Central Station, and nobody around them freaks out. It's like a fully crowded Grand Central Station, and John Wick just stabs a dude in the neck, and the crowds keep going about their business. So I think that's kind of that's the way the filmmakers are kind of acknowledging that we're dealing with this kind of like hyper violent or hyper realistic version of real life, and this is a world where there's a whole chain of hotels that cater specifically to assassins, and they have their own currency that they use to reimburse each other for successful assassinations, and they have this sort of mythical organization that heads up the whole community called the High Table, and it's this kind of rule-bound society that where if you step one toe out of line, you're going to get that toe chopped off, or maybe worse. This third movie just keeps that intensity from the first 2 movies up at the exact same level. John Wick barely stops moving for the entire movie.
Other than Keanu Reeves, obviously, are there any actors that are like sort of pervasive throughout the films or have appeared in all 3 films?
Yeah, so you've got Ian McShane, who a lot of people will know from Deadwood, and he's been a character actor for years. He plays the manager of the New York location of this continental hotel network that caters to assassins. So he's been in all 3 movies. He's kind of like a friend to John Wick. And then in the third movie, it finds him kind of at odds with John Wick, because in the world of these assassins, if you do any business in quotation marks, as in like kill anybody on the grounds of one of the Continental hotels, you'll be excommunicated from the Assassin's Guild, and the hotels won't be allowed to furnish you with any more weapons or give you any special services. So John Wick is excommunicado and on the run from all of these people who have a contract out on him. So he can't really hang out with Ian McShane or enjoy any of those services anymore, which makes things much harder for him. But then in terms of other actors, you've got Lance Reddick as this he barely speaks in any of these movies, but he's just the concierge of the New York hotel, and he's super cool whenever he's on screen.
Yep. The veteran of The Wire.
Yep, exactly. And you get to see him get into a gunfight in this third movie, which was awesome. And then for other characters, we've got Lawrence Fishburne, a nice little Matrix reunion there between him and Keanu Reeves. He plays another kind of facet of the assassin community called the Bowery King. He's like a homeless guy who has his own army of like homeless assassins. This third movie brings in a few new faces. You've got Asia Kate Dillon. They're a non-binary performer, so they prefer the singular version of the pronoun they, and they've made a name for themselves on the Showtime show Billions with Damian Lewis, this kind of high finance thing. So Asia Kate Dillon appears here as this nameless adjudicator who comes from the mythical High Table. They've got to investigate why John Wick has been able to kind of one-up the High Table at pretty much every encounter. And then a favorite performer of mine, or I wouldn't say a favorite performer, but It was fun to see this guy, Mark Dacascos, appear in this movie. He's a martial artist. He's an American guy with sort of an Asian heritage. But he...
Wasn't he the Iron Chef guy?
Oh, yeah. I think he might have been like a presenter on Iron Chef. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the host for the longest time.
Right.
I remember him.
So yeah, he has this whole background in like reality TV as a presenter, but he's also a super well-trained martial artist, and he pops up in this movie, this kind of like cult movie from 2001 called Brotherhood of the Wolf. Have you ever heard of that?
Nope.
So this is a movie, it was introduced to me by a colleague of mine who's super into movies, and it's kind of like a French-financed medieval fantasy movie, but with martial arts. And it's just wild. And like Mark Dacascos plays an indigenous guy who's really skilled in Asian martial arts. It sounds really crazy coming out of my mouth, but it's worth a watch because it's so unlike anything else. Yeah, I think he made that movie, and then he did a few like other martial arts things, and then of course moved into the Iron Chef role. But it's cool to see him back in like a full-on martial arts kind of role here, and he's kind of like the secret comedian of this movie. He's got some of like the funniest lines, and he's kind of got his character's got this sort of fanboy-esque affinity for John Wick, and like desperately wants to be friends with him while also trying to kill him.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's a lot to like here.
Yeah, as the host of Iron Chef, he was known for being like super over the top
with these like really big eyes and this like shaved head, and
yeah, he's got that stare. So I can see him being quite effective in a film like this.
Yeah. But the one thing that I will say about John Wick, though, is that, and I don't know if some of this might have been the reason why you haven't seen the second one yet, but the number of fight scenes and the length of the fight scenes in this third one kind of wears on you after a while. Not because the violence is like hyper gory or anything, because it's definitely not the goriest thing I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. But the scenes are just a little bit too long. They kind of like... You're really impressed in the beginning of it because, you know, that's Chad Stahelski who directs these movies. He lets Keanu Reeves do his thing. Like, it's all very well choreographed. They shoot it in wide shots. It's all like technically brilliant. There's no like fudging this with editing. These people are really doing these fights, but they're almost like too excited about it, and they just let the fights go on a little bit too long. And there's this scene where Keanu Reeves teams up with Halle Berry in a scene in Morocco, and they just get like basically 100 guys come after them, and it's just one person getting headshot after the other, and it gets to the point where you're like, all right, this is awesome. Like everything they're doing is awesome, but it's almost too much awesome.
So it's very Tarantino.
Not in a Tarantino sense where he's kind of like bathing in the blood or like enjoying himself too much. It's not really that kind of style. It's more just more awesome and more awesome. Like everything you're seeing is great, but it's almost like you're getting a sugar rush from it. Like you've had too much sugar.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Whereas like Tarantino is more like, let's get drunk.
I know that we both love Mad Max, but Mad Max does this very well in terms of balancing the length of these fight scenes. Mm-hmm. I think there are certain parts where you're like, okay, I feel like I need to take a break, but I think George Miller edited it well enough where you don't feel tired. You're always sort of entranced by what's happening on the screen.
True.
And from what I understand, John Wick 3 has a lot of practical stunts, because I know Keanu Reeves does his own gunplay a lot.
Yeah, he trains really hard for these movies, like months at a time. There's videos of him doing the gun ranges himself with like live ammunition. So, you can drop this guy into a battlefield and he'll hold his own. But yeah, all of that is like I said, it's like technically super proficient. Mm-hmm. And there's very few filmmaking teams basically in all of Hollywood that are doing this these days in terms of like real practical choreography.
Right.
As great as all of that is, it just feels like the movie I think is like 2 hours, 10 minutes. If they could have just lopped off like 10 or 15 minutes worth, it just would have been, it felt a little bit snappier, a little bit more together, as great as it all is.
But moving on, to finish off the episode, we really needed to touch up on Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her for it. And she grows more powerful and more sure that she is good and right. She believes her destiny is to build a better world for everyone. If you believed that, if you truly believed it, wouldn't you kill whoever stood between you and paradise?
I was in Taiwan, but I had access to it. But it was a little different because obviously I wasn't caught up in the fervor when you're living in North America, you're kind of bombarded by all this stuff.
Yeah, like your colleagues at work are watching it, your friends are watching it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big water cooler topic.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll ever have anything like this again. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on the final season and I think the final episode.
Honestly, I'm a little bit ambivalent. I'm not angry about it, you know,
I'm the same way as you.
I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. And I wish that weren't the case, because I can remember when I was really excited about this show, and you know, everything that it offered in terms of like the medieval fantasy, but with like the more adult tones, the emphasis on politics,
character development,
unfair outcomes. Like, you know, sometimes characters will just, you know, they will get their arc cut off midway, because that's something that might happen in a brutal medieval world, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, despite all of that promise, they slowly work themselves into a corner with the plotting on this final season.
I agree.
I read a really great take on it by one of my favorite film critics, Matt Zoller-Seitz, who basically pointed out that what we're definitely seeing in the final season of Game of Thrones is plot driving the character way more than it ever did in previous seasons.
Yes.
You know, whereas in previous chunks of the show, the plot is driven by character decisions, and the characters have agency, and they decide to do things, and it sends the show kind of like skittering off into a new direction because they do something crazy or ill-advised or super noble if you're Jon Snow. But in this eighth one, it feels more like stuff is just happening to the characters, and they're just kind of like getting kind of bludgeoned by it and not really reacting or changing at all.
Yeah, so I don't really have an issue of where the characters end up or their fates. Other than Bran, I think I could, you know, accept all of them. The only thing that kept running through my head throughout the entire season, and even last season too, was that the writing feels rushed. I really honestly felt like if they had extended last season to 10 episodes and this season to 10 episodes, or even did another 6 episode season, I think a lot of the issues that people had could be resolved. I definitely think that the showrunners, I think, got tired of running Game of Thrones. I think they wanted to move on to bigger and better things with Star Wars and Disney.
Yep.
I thought the performances were great. The acting was top notch. I think probably one of the best seasons ever, because I didn't find a character that was out of place. I mean, if you play a character for 8 seasons, you kind of have a good feel of where they're at.
Oh, yeah.
The cinematography was great. The directing was pretty good. It's just the writing. Going into season 7, this had a chance to be like a top 5 all-time show.
Yeah, like up there with Breaking Bad. And
Exactly. And based on how the last 2 seasons went, though, it fell off the cliff, and it really hurt its legacy, I think. At one point, I thought this was going to go head-to-head with The Wire as HBO's greatest show, but I think The Wire has come out so far ahead still that it's still untouched. I have a lot of issues about how they handled certain plot points. I don't mind the fact that, spoiler alert, obviously, that Dany gets killed. I think that was a logical conclusion for them to come to, but it feels very abrupt. It feels like every character's fate, other than, you know...
Yeah.
Some of the side characters, even Melisandre, Jorah Mormont, had more meaningful, impactful deaths on a dramatic level than, say, Jaime or Cersei Lannister. I think Euron Greyjoy was a terrible character. Like, downright awful for a show of that kind of scope.
Yeah, and he goes out in a wimpy way, too.
In a fight that no one cares about. And we wrote about this in our post, too. In that... Euron Greyjoy makes a whole deal of doing nothing. Hangs around Cersei a lot. Doesn't even kill Jaime Lannister. Has this like one-on-one duo that's just 2 men writhing in pain and hitting each other with rocks.
Yeah.
In an otherwise great episode of Dany burning down King's Landing. I know a lot of people had issues with how her character was dealt with. And from what I've read, part of the reason why it feels so abrupt too is that the ending was kept so closely under wraps that the characters, the actors who played the characters, didn't exactly know which direction to take their portrayals.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so, yeah, so when Dany becomes the Mad Queen, I think Emilia Clarke, when she's sitting on Drogon and the bells are ringing, I thought that was probably the best performance she's had in that series. But it turns too quickly.
Yeah, because I mean, there's people have gone back through the rest of the show and they've pointed out, there's plenty of examples earlier in Dany's arc where she has brushes with madness or with cruel methods and people rein her back in. So, it's not like her descent into madness is totally unforeseen. But yeah, when you go from like, the kind of headspace that she's in episode 3, the Battle of Winterfell or Battle of Ice and Fire, or whatever you want to call it, where she's triumphant, they've beat the Night King. Then in the 4th episode, she's planning to go back out to Dragonstone. Her second dragon is killed, which is obviously a huge blow for her right towards the end of that episode. But then right there at the beginning of the 5th episode, she's basically like distraught and, weepy and then, it all kind of unravels from there. But I feel like if they did have those few extra episodes where you could start to see more of her behavior starting to deteriorate, it would feel a little bit less abrupt. And
I think so.
Certainly, like just maybe a couple of extra scenes between her and Jon Snow, so that you can kind of get a little bit deeper into how he's rejecting her and how that may be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And
yeah, and there are a lot of things about the ending that didn't make a lot of sense to me, especially Bran being king. I had predicted that Sansa would be Queen of the North or something of the North, but at the same time, I thought it would be split into 7 separate kingdoms.
Yeah, because like what happened to to Yara's kind of agency?
Exactly. And what the hell was Dorne doing there? I don't think Dorne was really a big part of the 7 kingdoms to begin with. And they never tied up who sort of ran the Lannister lands, considering that Tyrion's the hand of the king. I didn't like the final scene with the small council and their ridiculous bickering. I think having Bronn as Master of Coin is a hilarious sentiment. And I think as a joke, I didn't like the fact that, again, Tyrion isn't mentioned in that book, the in-show book, Song of Ice and Fire. That was supposed to be a joke, but I felt it was really disrespectful towards Tyrion as a character. And as a historian, how can you not have the hand of the king for, I think, 2 separate rulers be omitted? I didn't get that.
Yeah, like it feels like Sam is dropping the ball on that particular thread quite a bit. Like unless he has no reason really to hate Tyrion or to want to cut him out of it, other than that joke.
Yeah, and having Bran sit on the throne, I get why they made him as the king, but now you question his motivation throughout the entire show. Like if he knew he was going to be king, I mean, he let a lot of damn people die, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Like why, you begin to like work your way backwards and you think to yourself, well, if he knew he was going to be king, why did he wait at Winterfell for the Night King to kind of cut his way through all those people to get to him? Why not go to a more defensible location further south or, any number of things?
Or if he was going to be king, why the hell would he tell Jon who his parents were? It becomes a moot point.
Yeah, true.
Like, logically, it doesn't make any sense to me. And the fact that a lot of these people just accept him as king, I didn't get that either. Grey Worm telling people to shut up and having all the agency he had in that scene and then disappearing and being like, screw this, I'm going to sail to Nath, I think didn't really make a lot of sense. And if you look back on it, I feel like the most complete character arcs are the side characters, where like Sansa,
Arya,
or like characters that didn't have a role in the Game of Thrones, so to speak, but for whatever reason just seemed to be treated a lot better than some of the more central characters. Yeah,
and like even the final like confrontation between Jon Snow and Dany in the ruined throne room, like the whole idea of having them embrace and then have him stab her just felt so
gimmicky.
Yeah, so gimmicky. Like, you know, we've seen that so many times before. They didn't even have like a shouting match or any kind of like argument about anything. You know, it would almost have been better for him to like chase her through the castle or something. You know, or I don't.
That would have been funny. I just think that on Dany's part, it was really a miss to not have her have like a full interaction with Cersei. Other than that so-called negotiation at the gate. I was disappointed that we didn't get enough flashbacks. I was disappointed we didn't get to see Mira Reed or Dario or a lot of characters that they just left behind. Obviously, time is a big reason for that. Especially when Drogon, when he melted the Iron Throne, I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, it's going to be the 7 separate kingdoms again, and it would lay the seeds down for further conflict in the future, which would have fit, I think, for George Martin's sort of bittersweet ending that he wanted to have.
Yeah.
But it was just dumb characters doing dumb things with conversations that only further plot but not develop character. It kind of drove me nuts. And I think it really ended on a mediocre tone. I don't know, based on what happens now in this final episode, if it's even worth watching the previous seasons, because a lot of the impactful stuff that characters do in the first couple seasons, namely Jaime Lannister sort of becoming a good guy, all of a sudden turn back to where they are by within a span of 1 or 2 episodes.
True, yeah. Like his whole thing is basically getting him back to where he was 5 seasons ago or something.
Exactly. So the part where he and Brienne sort of come to terms with each other and he reveals why he killed the Mad King, that becomes far less dramatic and impactful when you realize that at the end of the day, as he said, he doesn't give a shit about people.
Yeah.
And it totally betrays his characterization as someone who really thought of the people and didn't hesitate to kill a tyrant. Mm-hmm. I really didn't like that part. There were some good parts, though, I have to admit. Like, we finally got the Hound in the mountain battle.
Clegane Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. I thought Qyburn's death was hilarious. But also, by the end, like, how did Dany's army get so huge by the end of the King's Landing? It seems like the Dothraki were still around, which was like,
yeah, there was some confusing like continuity questions there.
Yeah, and it looked like she had like 10,000 Unsullied left. And I didn't really get that either. And how Drogon could destroy like freaking 100 scorpions when he couldn't do so the first time Rhaegal got shot down. We were missing a final confrontation between Jon and the Night King. The way I would have done it was probably still have Arya kill the Night King. I didn't have a problem with that, but it probably should have been like a bigger 2-on-1 battle with Jon and Arya, maybe teaming up as they should have done, because they're the closest siblings. I don't know what Bran was doing warging all the time. I'm of the belief that the horse that saved Arya from King's Landing was sent by Bran. You can't tell me otherwise, because then it's just too damn coincidental. And Samwell Tarly, I think for a guy who had cemented himself as brave enough, but also as someone with like key knowledge of the history of Game of Thrones, to relegate him to sort of like as a foot soldier in a battle and have his sort of key moment be a triumphant White Walker killer is sort of out of character for him as well. It's just a lot of little things,
Yeah, and they all kind of pile up, right? And I feel like
exactly.
It'll be interesting in like 5 or 10 years time if David Benioff and D.B. Weiss ever feel the need to like write a memoir or something and maybe talk about that period of writing these episodes, because it would be interesting to know just where their heads were actually at, if they're being honest with themselves.
Have you seen the YouTube video of someone had put together like clips of the actors and their reactions when people so I don't know if they were like kind of just disappointing of the way it ended, or if they were actually disgusted, but it does seem like the writers or the showrunners didn't take a lot of input from the actors who portrayed them, which I think was a wrong move on their part, because these actors know these characters better than anyone. I would think.
Oh yeah, you're in that person's head for a while, and
I think George R.R. Martin left the show at season 5 or 6 to work on his books. Like he had a pretty big part in writing the series prior to that, and I think it goes to show that as good as your production value may be, writing is still like the tip top most important part of any production.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes when you have the weight of everyone's expectations weighing down on you as a writer, it can kind of put you in a weird space where you want to write something that connects with you, but you also feel the weight of the expectations, and you're probably also tired out because you've been working on this same thing for over 8 years. And yeah,
I don't doubt that Arya's role against the Night King and Bronn's role in the final season were motivated by the fact that they were popular favorites for the people.
Mm-hmm. This is a show where for the first number of seasons, or for, maybe the first 6 seasons or so, you had a collection of characters who were playing a game, but then in the final 2 seasons, the game is playing them. And they're getting pushed around just by the sheer weight of all of the stuff that's come before, and not because they're actually doing anything of their own.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's probably not the first time it's happened. I imagine if you went back and did like a careful look back at some of the other shows that have kind of run out of steam in their final seasons, you would see some similar stuff. And there's definitely some people out there who would make a comparison to Lost. That was another show that a lot of people, it had a lot of energy in the early seasons and then started to kind of like flag as it went along. I've said this before, like I still love it, but the people who feel as though they were kind of skating on thin ice in that final season, they're not wrong. There's definitely some flaws there in that show. So I think it can happen with these big mythology heavy shows where you've got a lot of moving pieces, and it's easy to let things slip when your kind of personal investment in it is starting to go away.
But I'm glad it's over though. Like now I have Sunday nights free again.
True, yeah. You gotta find something else to watch.
Yeah, exactly. And the one thing I want to plug is Chernobyl. Have you watched it?
I saw the trailer for it ahead of a couple of the episodes of this, and it seems really cool. I like Jared Harris.
Yeah, so I watched I haven't finished the first episode, but I watched a bit of it. I can tell already it's going to be like a pretty good show. I don't know how good it'll be, but I feel like this has a lot of potential. A lot of HBO shows don't get heralded as much as they do because it's specialty cable, but they just routinely crank out really great stuff.
Yeah, like I want to get into The Leftovers, actually, which is Damon Lindelof's show that he did after Lost. It's got...
Is it going to be confusing as hell?
It's over now. Like it went to 4 or 5 seasons, I think, but it starred Justin Theroux and Carrie Coon.
Right.
And apparently it was wild and surreal and just very. It was a thing, and that would be the HBO show that I would circle back and watch next if I could. But
I think that covers it.
Yeah, that about does it for Game of Thrones. Naturally we have plenty of wrap-ups of each of the characters and their various endings, whether they bit the bullet or whether they lived to the end credits, that are posted up on kinetoscope.ca. So if you're curious about how we felt about each character and where they ended up, you can head on over to the site to check those out. Also got a new review of John Wick Chapter 3 that just went live today. That's up on the site if you want a little bit more detail on my thoughts on that one. And of course, we're now firmly within summer movie season, so we've got all sorts of cool stuff coming up in the near future that we'll be talking about. But until the next episode, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen from Vancouver. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.